believe it? That fish got so much wood over there. I'm just gonna have to hold him really tight. Good morning. I'm here. I'm gonna tie you a little Everglades fly. You could fish it it's on a size 1 Arex predator hook. You could fish this for what? Baby tarpon. Fish it for snook. You probably fish it for redfish. Where are there's my thread. You probably fish this for darn near all sorts of saltwater species. The color theme is white and red. And before you start going, oh, does that work? Of course it does. Don't you remember the red and white Daredevil? I gotta zoom in here. Of course, now I'm zoomed in. I can see that my hook is crooked. There, that's straight enough. So don't you remember? I've got a saltwater rooster cape here, and depending on the individual capes, sometimes at the side of these capes, you'll have some feathers that are kind of broad, and they have very stiff quill. They're kind of short. Come on out of here, boy. Here you go. They're kind of broad, and they have stiff center quills, but they make really nice tails on these flies. In part because they have a nice curve to them. You see that? I think you can. Nice curve. And the quill is quite firm, and so it won't foul around the hook. It's pretty easy to keep it from fouling. You don't really have to wrap around the hackle. So this is I'm gonna mount these on edge. So I went back. I had to go through the feathers on this saltwater cape, and a whole bunch of them have twisted hackle stems, which just doesn't work. But I finally found a pair that didn't, and I did have to wrap under the back, but these have got a nice curve in them. So let's get on with it here. Remember the old red and white Daredevil? That lure, that spoon, was fished all over the globe. Fresh water, salt water. Big spoons, little spoons. It's just a winner. And so why wouldn't red and white be good to this very day? Well, it is. Of course it is. Think about your Royal Coachman bucktail. Think about your bass plugs that are red and white. There's a whole variety of these things. Flies and lures. Red and white is just a good color combination. Now, read the books, get all cerebral about it, and you will see that red is either one of the first or the first color to just kind of turn gray underwater. And some people kind of dismiss red as being useful for that reason. But I see things differently. Because, I mean, you still have to get down in the water. And a lot of our fishing isn't deep, it's fairly shallow, and so the red still holds its captivating power until you do start getting down pretty deep. I'm trying to, I've got this red marabou, and it's nice and fluffy on 3 sides of this fly, and it's kind of weak on the side towards me, so I'm trying to bolster that. So anyway, that's my take on why red and white is a color we should be fishing everywhere. So, I got my red and I got my white, and I've got a much bigger lump of material here than I'm really happy with. So I wonder if I have a red saddle feather to palmer ahead of this. I'll bet I do. So we're fly tires. And if we only tie flies for trout, we very often, in fact, some of the earliest books I read about tying flies for trout back in the 60s and 70s were talking about matching the hatch. There are times when you're very much oriented towards imitating a bug that the fish are eating, or bait fish or crawdad or something like that. But then we get into imitative or impressionistic things, and I've been listening to a lot of videos, steelhead fly tires, and they're talking about trying to get their flies to be like a hot shot, which is a diving plug, or a spinner, which is anything but a fly. So I guess the point is it never hurts as a fly tyer to go back and see what sizes and shapes and colors of lures are being fished by anglers who are pursuing the same species we're interested in. So if we if we see, hey, the guys fishing gear are fishing red and white plugs, well then maybe that's a kind of a clue that we ought to be fishing a red and white fly too. So it's just something to think about. Some folks, myself, I fished with bait and gear mostly. I did learn to fly fish for trout at a fairly early stage in my development, but I still did a lot of gear fishing for steelhead and salmon. So it makes sense. Look at what the gear folks are using and think about that. At least consider that as an option when you're tying your flies. Makes sense. Got a few stray hackle barbules here. So I don't actually know how effective a red and white color combination is for tarpon or snook, but my guess is it certainly has its time and place. be surprised if it doesn't. It may be that I know last year I sent a friend down to fish for baby tarpon, and I gave him some of my tarpon flies, and I think all he had was a purple and black EP streamer. And I think he said he fished it the whole time. So he wasn't feeling particularly adventurous, and he was perfectly happy fishing a purple and black the whole time he was there because it was catching fish, and that's great. But who knows? Who knows what might have happened if he had tied on a red and white. And I'm also going to leave it to you to decide whether this white, short little stubby white tail with red marabou and schlappen is really the best configuration. But mostly what I'm doing is just telling the story and keeping me out of trouble early in the morning. Refreshing my meager skills at applying eyes, which definitely do need refreshing. You know, it's interesting, I've gone through several iterations of this UV cure. Started out with clear cure goo, and then that became hard to get, and it was just Loon or Deer Creek, and now we have Solarez. And I think they're getting a little bit better with time, but well, they are. They're getting better with time. But you know, at any point in our development as tyers, we've got what we've got. And so, you know, when Cure Goo is new, it's like, wow, here's this great stuff. You know, we got to rush out and buy a lifetime supply, and we're using it. And well, maybe it's not perfect. Maybe it's some of it yellows. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's tacky, maybe it's not glossy, but it's sure better than epoxy, I think. And then something new comes along, and we gotta all rush out and buy that stuff. And then pretty soon you can't get it, but fortunately there's something new. There's usually something new. And but if you know we've got a big stash of, if I had a big stash of clear Cure Goo, I'd still use it because it is perfectly adequate. Okay, I've rambled quite enough. I hope you find this. There's that tail right in there. There's that tail hiding in there. You can consider whether this fly is worth your merit or not. Tie a tail longer. Have fun with it. Thank you very much for joining me, and I'm going to sign off now.